Remember the Emoji Movie? I'm talking about this piece of shit. After this video, I'll never speak of it again. I promise. Otherwise, well, you decide on my punishment. That is how bad this movie really is. What's up, nerds? Stereotypical and not so stereotypical alike? Welcome to the channel, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the piece of crap that is this animated film. Released back in 2017 by Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures Animation, this film arrived at the perfect time, with smartphones increasingly imprinted into our daily lives and the emoji definitely an important invention in the history of communication. It takes place inside the smartphone of high school freshman Alex and stars a meh emoji named Jean as the main character. But just because it's very much relatable to Gen Z, yeah, the smartphone generation, doesn't mean it's good. Oh no, it's this.
But Eric, the film made a shitload of money. If it made $217 million against a $50 million budget, surely it wasn't that bad.
No, Cheetah Boy, it was that bad. I'd say that the reason the film was so commercially successful is solely because of its timing. Like, we're talking about a time when the emoji's popularity was just as pronounced as ever, and almost anybody could recognize it. Like, by this point, the emoji was no longer just a little emoticon on your phone screen. Now, it could also be a plushie, or a keychain, or even a backpack. You might as well say it leaped out of our phone screens to become a pop cultural phenomenon. In terms of criticism, this movie was just awful. The ratings were far worse than Justin Trudeau's polling numbers as of April 2024, with the Emoji Movie having received only 7% on Rotten Tomatoes, and fierce criticism when the trailers debuted, of course. And if you gave this movie 5 stars on Rotten Tomatoes, then after having watched just the first act of this film, I can safely say that I'd rather just stick to using emojis on my phone instead of having to watch the emojis in this thing. Now let's do a recap of Act 1 and discuss exactly why this movie is so bad. So fittingly, we start outside of high school. Man, the smartphone addiction epidemic is even worse than I thought, and the main human character, Alex, is certainly not immune.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
And Alex, in particular, is so addicted to emojis. Literally, that's all he ever types with. How lazy is this guy when he can't even take the time to type out a single hi? In fact, the emoji is such a big part of this guy's life that inside his smartphone, literally, the emojis have their very own city called Textopolis. Every emoji has just one job and they're supposed to nail it every time. Now, for some emojis, this job is quite easy. If you're a Christmas tree, you just be a Christmas tree 24/7. If you're a princess, you just keep your hair neat and wear stunning dresses. Life is a bit more difficult for face emojis, however. Like the face emojis that you see on your smartphone screen in the real world, each emoji has only one facial expression, and they're supposed to keep that expression all the time, no matter what situation they find themselves in. No questions, no negotiations. And this is where things start to get pretty awkward. Okay, at least the crying emoji is somewhat believable in this regard, because theoretically, I guess you could say there is the possibility that he was actually crying tears of joy after having won the lottery. Oh my god, was that an unintended fan theory? Never mind, I'm not actually a fan of the movie. Anyway, whether those tears were of sadness or of joy, it certainly doesn't sound like this emoji was happy, and the laughing emoji here was plain shocking. Like, get real, people. Who in their right mind would laugh uncontrollably when you've got a searing pain coming from a broken bone in your arm? Well, definitely not me. Just like I'm not laughing at this movie either. My point is, none of this makes any sense, nor does it leave room for the audience to identify with the characters and envision any sort of depth in this story. Anyway, the most unique emoji of them all is Jean. He's quite a freak show compared to the rest of the emojis, because while he's supposed to have a neutral facial expression and a whatever attitude at all times, he doesn't always follow that expectation. Instead, he is capable of making many different facial expressions, often uncontrollably, and this causes other emojis in Textopolis to see him in a bad light, including a donut and her babies. Really? A super sexy flamenco dancer? And even his own parents, Mel and Mary. Jean's ultimate goal in life is to feel useful as an emoji by being up there with other emojis in the cube, which is this really big database of emojis in Textopolis that Alex uses to send text messages. But the issue here is, Mel and Mary are reluctant because they don't feel that Gene is capable of taking on such a thing, and that he might mess up and make the wrong face. But after a brief conversation, Gene manages to convince Mel and Mary to give him a chance. So on his first day at the job, Gene, unable to control his excitement or his facial expressions, meets a system supervisor, Smiler. Now this bitch, who annoyed the hell out of me, is constantly smiling even in situations that definitely don't warrant it, and she prefers to keep her hands clean. Yeah, she's a bitch, alright. If she was a human character, I'm guessing she'd be a self-entitled, stereotypical Karen. But when it is Gene's turn to be in the spotlight, things go horribly wrong. When Alex is choosing which emoji to send to Addie, he selects Gene. As Mel and Mary watch, they are nervous, and it turns out they were right to be nervous because, at that moment, Gene panics and makes many wrong faces. This causes the scanning finger to capture a completely unintended result, and that sets off a chain reaction of events inside Alex's phone, which starts with the wrong emoji being sent to Addie, and meanwhile back in Textopolis, the cube is destroyed. Smiler, in classic Smiler fashion, tells Gene that he has a malfunction and calls a board meeting to determine what the next course of action should be with this supposedly malfunctioning emoji. Gene arrives at the boardroom just as the meeting has come to an end and tries to plead his case to Smiler, who is angry and frustrated in a way that not even her wide toothy grin can conceal. But he is unsuccessful, and Smiler orders an army of antivirus bots to delete Gene from existence so he doesn't have to worry about his purpose anymore, or be a burden to everyone else. Gene runs for his life and tries to hide in the VIP area among a bunch of other emojis who apparently are very important to Alex's texting life, like coffee. Oh, the VIP area! Of course! Way to make yourself an outcast, buddy. Like coffee? Seriously? For a 14-year-old boy on the regular, is that even healthy? So when the robots catch sight of Gene, High Five helps him flee. He leads Gene up a staircase to the Loser Lounge, which is a hidden hangout spot for all of the emojis that Alex never uses. There, High Five suggests to Gene that he go see the hacker, who will reprogram Gene and make him into a true meh emoji. Gene likes this idea, then commits to it and proceeds to exit the room with High Five. And that's the end of Act 1 of this movie. But that's really all I got to see of this movie, because after the first 20 minutes, I decided for myself that I hated this movie so much that I did this. Fuck! Just kidding. Instead, I would save so much time, pain, and money by just stopping the movie instead of letting that timestamp tick up by 1 extra second. Spoiler alert! That's what I did. You see, if you're a writer, you'll know that many stories, especially movies, are written using the 3-act structure. In the first act, the world, characters, and conflict are introduced and is undeniably critical for grabbing the audience's interest and laying the groundwork for the entire story. But in the Emoji Movie, the first 20 minutes basically tank the whole thing and tell me that the rest of the movie is, well, that. As soon as I knew that the main character, an emoji, is an outcast among all other emojis, I knew that the film was in trouble. This is basically a story where an emoji, that who knows how many people all over the world use every single day, and each one of which never changes, needs to find a purpose. And it all takes place inside a fictional world in a smartphone. And not only that, but his purpose doesn't nearly stack up against a much more interesting plot about a human or an anthropomorphic animal character who has something like arguably much greater that they want to achieve. Like think Ratatouille or Zootopia, just to name a couple. The whole plot of the Emoji Movie, at least in these first 20 minutes, doesn't make sense because I thought emojis already had a purpose, to just be what they were designed to be. I'm sorry, but if you're writing a story and your main character's desire is to just do nothing more than what they're supposed to do, then chances are your story just wasn't meant to be. Gene can certainly make facial expressions, but for the entirety of the short time I watched this, I had a straight face. No smiles, no laughter. And you certainly can't ignore the lame and unfunny jokes. We're talking an injured elderly colon, a stroller of baby donut bites, and an always smiling even in shocking situations emoji who could be an attractive woman if it wasn't for that personality of hers, even considering the way she treats these two guys. Yeah, doesn't sound so funny, don't you think? Now these unfunny jokes definitely don't help this movie in any way because they're lame and they feel forced. But I also think that this goes back into a bigger issue, in my opinion. Like, to me, this movie feels like an ill-fated attempt to copy something that Pixar might do, and it ended up backfiring on Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures Animation, at least in terms of critical reception. But in the end, it feels to me that not even a strong box office performance was able to save this film or put it on par with Pixar in any way. Well, at least with Pixar, they're still capable of telling stories that are original, truly imaginative, well written, and unlike anything else that you would see, even if the last couple years haven't exactly been kind to Pixar. But I would argue that this was at least partly due to COVID-19, with Onward, Turning Red, and Luca all having had their box office performances significantly affected by the lockdowns around that time, which forced Pixar to turn to streaming services. A couple of months ago, I watched Elemental, which released post-pandemic in 2023, and you might know this film because it didn't do so well in the box office at first, but then it made a surprising comeback later on. In my opinion, it was a clever and well-told story where the writers did a good job of overcoming challenges that involved mixing incompatible elements together in terms of both story and humor. And before that there was Toy Story 4, which at the time that this video was published, was the latest installment in a franchise that, just admit it in the comments down below, we all thought had ended with Toy Story 3. And yet this film still managed to rake in over $1 billion, a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and above all else, it told a fun, memorable, and adventurous story. So, in conclusion, I would say that the Emoji Movie probably isn't worth watching. I mean, the intentions were good when Sony and Columbia made this film, and it was a nice attempt to try something a little bit different and be a little imaginative, but the whole script was just lame and not that well executed. And if they were trying to compete with Pixar, well, they certainly failed miserably on that one. So what did you think of the Emoji Movie? Leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and you might just get a reply. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more film and animation recaps and critiques. Hope to see you next time, nerds. And in the meantime, maybe enjoy these bloopers. When the robots catch... robots. I want robots. So when the robots catch... not cats. I would have saved so much more time and money by just... I messed up. I would save so much time, pain, and money by just clicking the close tab instead of letting that timer click up. Click up. What am I saying? What am I... I'm sorry, I messed up again. As soon as I knew that the... I'm sorry, I messed up again. At least in these first 20 minutes, I messed up, I'm sorry. These unfunny jokes definitely don't help the movie in any way because of their lame... These unfunny jokes are definitely problematic. And now these unfunny jokes don't help this movie in any way at all because they feel lame and forced. And it was a clever and well-told story that... I'm sorry, I messed up.